It was snowing in Portland when I opened my phone and heard the voicemail that changed everything. My mother's voice, cool and rehearsed, said, "Vanessa, we all agreed. You're not welcome this Christmas." Behind her, I could hear my sister Melissa's faint laughter like a knife wrapped in tinsel. "It's better this way," she added. "You always make things tense." I replayed it twice, my coffee growing cold on the table. The words stayed flat, final, as if they had practiced them together before pressing record. No explanation, no apology, just a verdict. They thought I would cry, that I would beg to come back to their shining villa in Seattle, to sit beside a tree I paid for, eating food I helped fund. But something inside me shifted as the snow fell outside my window. This year, I wasn't driving anywhere. This year, I would let silence speak for me, until silence became proof. The morning light was pale and cold, filtering through the blinds in strips. I sat at the same kitchen table where every December I used to plan the family's Christmas budget. My laptop hummed quietly, waiting for a notification that wouldn't come. I refreshed my inbox again, nothing from the Holt family Christmas thread. No cheerful emails from Mom about color schemes, no dramatic all-caps reminders from Melissa about catering deadlines. I checked the shared drive, the one we had used for years, to organize playlists, decorations, and receipts. When the red warning flashed, "Access denied," I froze. I tried the link again, then again, still locked out. The digital equivalent of a door slammed shut. I reached for my coffee, now lukewarm, and took a sip just to feel something warm. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. From Mom. "Don't worry about Christmas this year," it read. "You've been busy. It's better this way." My thumb hovered above the screen. "No, I love you, no, we'll miss you," just a dismissal wrapped in politeness. I stared until the phone dimmed, and my reflection appeared faintly on the black glass eyes, tired lips pressed tight. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, coating the parked cars in quiet white. Somewhere, across town, families were hanging lights, baking cookies, laughing. My apartment stayed silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. I told myself maybe they'd forgotten to include me. Maybe there had been a mistake. But deep down I knew better. Silence that clean is never accidental. My stomach tightened. The kind of ache that doesn't throb it, just sits there heavy. I opened my laptop again, not to check emails, but to distract myself with numbers. Spreadsheets were something I could control. I clicked on the household accounts folder I'd maintained for years. Rows and rows of figures stared back at me, mortgage payments, utilities, villa rent, insurance, all neatly color-coded. Every month, thousands transferred out of my account to keep their comfort alive. And at the bottom of the column, next week's entries blinked in waiting. $2.800 villa rent, $1.200 decorations, $7.500 catering. I sat back slowly. My hand trembled slightly as I scrolled. There it was, line after line of what I'd covered holiday after holiday. Every receipt, every confirmation, my quiet contribution. I had told myself it was family duty, that helping Mom and Melissa was a sign of love. But now, hearing her voice in that voicemail, it didn't sound like love at all. It sounded like entitlement. My own generosity turned into their convenience. I rubbed my temple and laughed softly under my breath. The kind of laugh that isn't humor, just disbelief. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My mind replayed the last Christmas I had attended. I could still smell the pine from the tree Melissa insisted on importing from Canada. The table had been set for 12 gold-trimmed plates matching napkin rings. I arrived late after finishing a project deadline for a client, arms full of gifts and a tray of cookies still warm. No one looked up when I entered. Melissa glanced over and said, "Oh, you made it," before turning back to pour champagne. My seat at the table was already taken by a cousin I barely knew. I ended up standing by the counter, eating from a paper plate, watching laughter swirl around the room like I was invisible. That night, when I drove back to the villa, I'd paid the power bill for, I told myself it was just stress. Families forget to be kind sometimes, but they hadn't forgotten. They had decided. Now, sitting here a year later, the truth settled in colder than the winter air outside. They hadn't just forgotten to include me, they had erased me. I thought about how easily people can delete a name, a photo, an email thread, and how final it feels when it happens. I closed the laptop, then reopened it again, almost on instinct. My eyes drifted to the autopay column. Every bill was still scheduled, neatly stacked for the coming week. I could almost hear Mom's voice saying, "Vanessa's good with numbers. Let her handle it." I had always handled it. I had built their comfort piece by piece, kept the lights on, the heat running, the parties funded, and they had thanked me by excluding me from the celebration I paid for. I stood and walked to the window. The street below was coated in white, the kind of snow that made the world look pure, like it was starting over. My breath fogged the glass. Across the street, a family was setting up a Christmas tree in their living room. A little boy stood on a stool trying to hang an ornament too high, and his father lifted him laughing. The scene blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them away. I wasn't going to cry this time. The cold glass against my palm steadied me. The voicemail still sat in my inbox. I pressed play again just to be sure I hadn't misheard. "We all agreed you're not welcome." That phrase looped in my head like an echo bouncing off empty walls. We all agreed. Not "I'm sorry," not "we need space." A decision, collective, deliberate, like a family board vote. I saved the message in a separate folder labeled proof, then placed the phone face down on the table. I turned back to my laptop and reopened the spreadsheet. The numbers blinked back at me. $2,800. $1, $200. $7, $500. Each one a small part of their perfect Christmas. Each one with my name behind it. For years I had told myself I didn't mind being the one behind the curtain, the one who made everything work while others took the credit. But hearing that voicemail, I realized something. They hadn't seen me as family in a long time. I was just the system that made their comfort automatic, the invisible switch that kept their world warm and bright. I reached for my coffee, took a slow sip, and stared at the frost tracing the edge of the window. The quiet in the apartment shifted. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt deliberate, focused. I reopened the banking app on my phone and scrolled through the scheduled transactions. The confirmation dates lined up neatly. I didn't touch anything yet, not a single payment. But I let my finger hover above the pause button. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about control. For the first time in years, the power wasn't in their hands. The clock ticked toward noon. Outside, the snow continued falling, blanketing the city in stillness. I closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room. They think they can erase me with a voicemail. My voice was steady, almost calm. But they forgot every light in that house runs through me. The words hung there, quiet but solid, like a promise I hadn't said out loud until now. I set my mug down, straightened the papers on the table, and opened a fresh document. At the top, I typed 2 words, family accounts. Then I stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment before adding the date, December 10th. The first entry, mortgage $2,800, paid monthly by me. I smiled faintly. Proof begins small. Sometimes it starts with a single sentence, and sometimes that sentence is the beginning of the end. The morning after the voicemail, the air in my apartment felt hollow, as if the silence itself had mass. Frost covered the window pane in pale streaks, muting the world outside. I made coffee out of habit, but even the scent felt thinner somehow. My phone was face down on the table, the faint glow underneath it, pulsing with unread notifications I had no desire to see. I told myself I wouldn't check. I told myself I didn't care. Then, of course, I did. No new messages, no calls, not a single word from my mother or sister. I opened social media, half out of boredom, half from muscle memory. The first post I saw stopped me cold. Melissa had posted a photo of the villa's entryway draped in garlands and gold lights. Her caption read, Can't wait for our family weekend. Love my people. The words made my throat tighten. The decorations looked familiar, too familiar. I zoomed in and recognized the custom wreath I'd ordered last year and stored at the villa. I had paid for it. My name wasn't anywhere near that post, but my money was in every inch of it. I saved the post to a private folder labeled Record. It wasn't spite, it was instinct. I was an accountant. Documentation was my defense. Still, I stared at that image for a long moment before closing the app. Outside, the morning sun was dull, and the city quiet under a thin veil of snow. It looked peaceful in the way grief sometimes does. I opened my phone again and searched for our family group chat, the one called Holiday Hub. It wasn't there. My stomach dipped. I scrolled up, typed the name again, checked archives. Nothing. Gone. I switched to my email, hunting for the usual messages about logistics and menus. My search returned a single result thread deleted by organizer. I could almost hear Melissa's voice saying, "Simpler this way." My hands felt cold against the keyboard. I opened the shared drive we'd used for years to plan events. Each folder that had once held grocery lists, playlists, and receipts now read "Access Restricted." I clicked repeatedly until the words blurred. It was a clean-cut, digital, and precise. No yelling, no explanation, just erasure. A wave of nausea rose in me, but it wasn't from shock. It was recognition. I'd felt this before years ago in smaller ways, when they'd cropped me out of a photo to fit the frame or left my name off a card by accident. This was just the logical conclusion of a pattern they'd been rehearsing for years. I switched to my photo library. There were hundreds of images, birthdays, graduations, holidays. In half of them, I wasn't there. Sometimes I was behind the camera, other times cropped out entirely. Each edit felt like a little death, quiet but deliberate. I whispered under my breath, "You didn't just forget me. You deleted me." The sound of my own voice startled me. I closed the photos and stared at the empty black screen for a while. The reflection that stared back didn't look fragile, just tired. I reached for my planner and wrote one line on a blank page, "Silence is evidence too." The days stretched on like cold honey. Around noon, my coworker Derek called to check on a year-end report. His voice was cheerful. "Ready for Christmas chaos, yet not this year," I said. "Good for you," he laughed. "You deserve a break." His words were so casual, but they felt heavier than anything my family had said in months. I thanked him, promised to email the spreadsheet, and hung up. The contrast hit me like a quiet truth-kindness from a coworker, felt more genuine than anything my blood relatives had offered in years. That night, I made myself dinner: pasta, garlic, a glass of wine. I set one plate, one glass, one candle. The ritual felt strange but comforting in a way I hadn't expected. On the TV, a commercial blared about family Christmas deals. I muted it. The only sound left was the gentle hum of the heater and the faint laughter from a neighbor's apartment. I sat with my meal half eaten and opened my banking app without really thinking. The numbers loaded, lines of quiet responsibility staring back at me. There they were, scheduled transactions, the mortgage, the utilities, the villa's property tax. All still active, all mine. It hit me slowly, like watching frost form on glass. Even after being cut off, I was still funding their celebration. My name might not be on the guest list, but it was on every bill. The absurdity made me laugh out loud, the sound sharp and bitter. "They built their Christmas on my autopay," I said, softly to the empty room. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The room felt too quiet again. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels, checking email, but nothing held. Eventually, I opened the family photo folder again, scrolling through years of moments I'd captured. My mother's birthday dinner, Melissa's engagement, the charity gala, all events I had helped plan, pay for, and photograph. Each picture was polished and perfect, but it told the same story. I was the invisible scaffolding, holding up their spotlight. My phone buzzed on the counter. For a second, my pulse jumped, maybe finally an apology. But it was a bank reminder, upcoming payment December 27, $2,800, the villa's rent. I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the window. The city lights shimmered in the glass like ghosts. I whispered, "They wanted a Christmas without me. Let's see how that feels." But I didn't move yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I opened a notebook and began listing everything I'd been paying: mortgage, $2,800 divided by month; utilities, average $350 divided by month; internet, $140 divided by month; insurance, $200 divided by month. I wrote until the page filled. Then I flipped to the next. Each number steadied me. Each dollar was proof that I hadn't imagined the weight. By midnight, the apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I sat at my desk with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the lines of figures in front of me. My breath fogged the window. I ran my finger down the list, tracing years of obligations disguised as love. I thought about all the times my mother had said, "You're such a help to the family," and how those words always came right before she asked for something else. I thought about Melissa's half smile when I brought extra wine or covered the delivery costs for her wedding favors. None of it was gratitude. It was expectation. The heater clicked on, breaking the stillness. I closed my notebook, whispering, "They called it family. I called it finance." Something shifted inside me then, not anger, not grief, but a quiet sort of precision. The kind of feeling that settles when you finally see the pattern clearly. I opened my laptop again, created a new folder on the desktop, and named it Frozen Accounts. Inside, I dragged the bank statement, the utilities receipts, and the confirmation emails. Each file slipped neatly into place like evidence arranged before a trial. I added the screenshot of Melissa's Christmas post for good measure. The clock on my stove blinked 2:14 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, the fatigue settling deep but strangely calm. My world had been reduced to stillness. No music, no voices, no noise, only proof. I stood by the window again, watching the snow fall under the streetlights. The flakes looked delicate but deliberate, covering everything in slow, inevitable silence. My fingers rested on the glass, cool against my skin. I thought of the drive in Seattle, the garlands, the laughter I could almost hear through memory. Then I thought of the bills waiting for automatic withdrawal, the empty chat threads, the voicemail that had ended a lifetime of pretending. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The air was cold, clean, unburdened. When I opened them again, I whispered, "They erased me from their plans. But they forgot I'm still in their system." I turned off the lights and let the dark wrap around me like armor. Somewhere across the state, they were decorating a villa I paid for drinking wine I'd unknowingly bought, believing I was gone. But the truth was simpler, colder, quieter. I wasn't gone. I was watching. The glow of my laptop lingered in the corner of the room, the folder Frozen Accounts waiting patiently on the desktop. I sat back down and opened it one last time. There was something oddly comforting in the order of it all, that chaos reduced to clean digital lines. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I didn't press anything yet, but the cursor blinked beside the words, "Account access pending." Outside the city slept under snow, oblivious. I closed my notebook and whispered into the dark. They wanted silence. Now they'll have it. The words felt steady, almost kind. Not a threat, just a promise written in frost. The next morning, the air in my apartment felt too still, too clean. I woke up before sunrise, unable to shake the thought that the numbers I saw last night weren't just reminders of bills, they were fingerprints of betrayal. The coffee maker hissed quietly as I opened my laptop, the blue light flickering across the wall. My spreadsheet waited calm and silent, like it knew what was coming. A new email sat in my inbox, subject line, "Payment Confirmation, December." It was from Evergreen Lending, my mother's mortgage lender. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Then I saw my name listed in the recipient line, not hers. I opened the message and read slowly. Thank you, Vanessa Holt, for your continued commitment. Payment received $2,800. My coffee went cold in my hands. Continued commitment. I hadn't agreed to commit to anything. I stared at the date and felt a strange wave of nausea. They were still using my account. Even now, after telling me I wasn't welcome, my mother was letting the system drain my money as if nothing had changed. I clicked into my online banking dashboard. The balance stared back clean and sterile. I scrolled through the statements each month, lined up neatly $2,800 on the first utilities mid-month insurance the 20th. No missed payments. 48 months. 4 years. I counted again to be sure. 48. My heart pounded as I opened the calculator, typing the total. The number blinked at me. $134,400. That was just the mortgage. Add gas, electric, water, internet taxes, another $19,000, maybe more. I leaned back, my stomach twisting. 4 years of my life had quietly disappeared into that house. 4 years of dinners I didn't eat, lights I didn't switch on, heat I never felt. I took a long breath and opened my printer drawer, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. I began writing line by line the amounts, the dates, the confirmation codes. My pen left small indentations in the paper, firm and steady. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't change their story to fit the audience. By the time I was done, the table was covered with receipts and statements. The evidence looked almost beautiful, rows of black ink lined up like a confession. I opened the filing drawer under my desk, searching for the original loan paperwork. My fingers brushed against a folder marked Evergreen Mortgage, 2019. I pulled it out and unfolded the documents slowly. There it was in fine print: primary owner Diana Holt, and below smaller, colder co-borrower Vanessa Holt. The words blurred. I blinked hard, but they stayed the same. No mention of shared ownership, no equity, just liability. I remembered that day. My mother's kitchen smelled like lemon polish and coffee. She'd waved her hand dismissively when the loan officer explained the terms. It's just to help me get approved. Once things stabilize, we'll switch it to both our names. Melissa had been there too, stirring sugar into her coffee, smiling. You know Mom wouldn't cheat you, Ness. Don't be dramatic, I'd believe them. I signed the line. I had wanted to be useful. That word had always felt like love. Now, years later, that signature was an anchor tied around my neck. I sat very still, my thumb tracing the indentation of the notary stamp on the corner of the page. A deep, slow ache settled in my chest, not sharp like anger, but dull like recognition. This wasn't new. This was just the first time I'd seen it printed in black and white. I folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the folder, and whispered, "They never planned to share. They only planned to take." Outside, snow fell again, soft flakes swirling past the window like the world had decided to start over without me. I stood and went to the kitchen for another cup of coffee, but the smell turned my stomach. Instead, I filled a glass with cold water and stared at my reflection in the window. My eyes looked darker, sharper. Not broken, just awake. I carried the glass back to the table and sat down in front of my laptop. I logged into the electric company's website. My name filled the top of the screen: primary account holder Vanessa Holt. Billing address Villa, Seattle. Next tab, gas company. Same thing. Internet provider. Same. Insurance policy. Every single account had my name first. Every password, every email. And every one of them billed to the same address, the house that no longer had a seat for me at the table. I scrolled through the confirmation emails one by one. Payment received. Autopay confirmed. Account in good standing. It read like a compliment for a job I didn't remember applying for. My hands trembled slightly as I began taking screenshots. Click Save label. Utilities, proof, 2020. Internet, records, 2021. Mortgage, payments, 2022. Each file slid neatly into my desktop folder, titled Frozen Accounts. I wasn't sure why I was saving it all. Maybe because for so long I'd been told that memory was unreliable, that I was too sensitive, that I misunderstood. Screenshots didn't misunderstand. When I finished, I leaned back and looked at the glow of the laptop in the dark room. The files lined up neatly, a digital reflection of my life. I whispered to no one. They deleted me from their family, but not from their finances. My phone buzzed a notification from the bank confirming an automatic transfer for next week. I didn't even open it. I just let the sound echo through the quiet. I pushed the chair back and began pacing the apartment, the floor creaking softly under my steps. Each movement felt mechanical. My body was there, but my mind was somewhere between disbelief and calculation. I thought about all the birthdays, holidays, and weekends I'd missed because I was helping them get back on track. I remembered Melissa's voice last year on the phone. "You don't mind covering it, right? You're better with money anyway." I had smiled, said. Of course, then spent the evening calculating how to stretch my paycheck until January. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. A couple crossed the intersection, laughing, their breath visible in the cold air. Somewhere, a car radio played a Christmas song. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a credit card notification. Payment posted $1.238. I frowned, opening the message. The merchant name appeared: Evergreen Decor Rentals. It took me a second to place it, then I remembered. Melissa had mentioned hiring a company to decorate the villa for the family gathering. She must have used my card, one I'd once handed her for emergencies. I laughed quietly, the sound sharp. I scrolled back through my account history and found more charges. Catered Elegance, $7.500. Candlelight Designs, $1.200. Villa Maintenance, $2.800. Every transaction, every festive light string, every dinner plate bought with my silence. The laughter faded, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat. I opened the Frozen Accounts folder again and began dragging screenshots of these charges inside. Each one landed with a soft click. Proof, proof, proof. When I was done, I sat there staring at the folder, the cursor blinking beside the name, as if waiting for me to finish the sentence. I added one more word: Frozen Accounts. Evidence. My reflection on the screen looked unfamiliar. My face was pale in the glow, my eyes steady. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I took a pen from the drawer and wrote in my notebook: mortgage, $2.800 utilities, $350 internet, $140 insurance, $200 decorations, $1.200 catering, $7.500. At the bottom, I wrote the total: $12.190. Then, beneath it, one final word: enough. I stared at that page for a long time. My breath came out in soft clouds against the chill of the room. I whispered, "They wanted to live without me. Now they can." The heater kicked on again, the steady hum filling the silence. I closed the notebook and set it beside the laptop. Then, slowly, deliberately, I created a new subfolder inside Frozen Accounts. I named it The Cold Truth. I moved every document, every screenshot, every receipt inside. Each drag felt cleaner than the last. Order where chaos used to be. When I was done, I leaned back in the chair and let the stillness settle. My gaze drifted toward the window, where snow continued to fall, erasing footprints, smoothing rough edges. I thought of how much energy I'd spent trying to keep everything running for them, for appearances, for family. I'd called it love because calling it servitude would have broken me. Now the truth was colder but honest. For years I'd been paying for a house I'd never really belonged to, and tonight I was finally done pretending it was home. The sun rose pale and sharp through the blinds, slicing thin lines of light across the floor. My table was still covered in paper from the night before, statements, receipts, legal printouts, each one a thread tied to people who had already cut me loose. I didn't bother cleaning up. The mess told the truth better than I could. I brewed coffee but didn't drink it. My stomach turned at the smell. Instead, I sat down at the table and began sorting the papers into piles. Mortgage, utilities, decorations, catering. Every category of convenience they'd built on my name. I labeled each folder, neatly handwriting, calm, methodical. The act of organizing felt like reclaiming space inside my own head. When I reached the loan document, I hesitated. The notary stamp glinted under the light, faint and gray. I ran my thumb across the embossed seal. The ink from my signature had faded, but the mistake still screamed from the page. Primary owner Diana Holt, co-borrower Vanessa Holt. The words hadn't changed overnight, but the way I read them had. They were no longer just fine print. They were the architecture of my blindness. I'd wanted to help to prove that I was dependable, that being single and childless didn't make me selfish. And in doing so, I'd handed over 4 years of my life. I remembered that morning in my mother's kitchen. She'd smiled sweetly, sliding the documents toward me across the counter. "It's just until the bank trusts me again," she'd said. "You're good with finances. This will be easy for you." Melissa had been leaning against the fridge, scrolling on her phone. "You know Mom would never take advantage of you," she'd said without looking up. I'd laughed, nervous but trusting. Of course not. Now sitting in my apartment, the memory felt surgical, precise, clinical, stripped of warmth. That moment hadn't been love. It had been a transaction dressed as affection. I took a red pen from my drawer and underlined the words, "No ownership claim," 3 times. Then I wrote in the margin, "intentional." The silence in the apartment deepened. Outside snow began to fall again, whispering against the window. I thought of every smaller betrayal that had led to this. The time my mother forgot my birthday because Melissa's car broke down. The night I drove 3 hours to deliver Christmas gifts I'd bought, only to find everyone already gone to dinner. The mornings after family gatherings, when my inbox filled with, "Can you cover the bill until next week?" They'd built their comfort one withdrawal at a time. Every time I paid, they thanked me less. Every time I asked for clarity, they called me sensitive. I pushed the papers aside and stood. The air in the apartment felt heavy. I opened the window a crack, letting the cold in until I could breathe again. Somewhere below, a neighbor was shoveling snow, his radio faintly playing a Christmas song. The normalcy of it stung. Life went on perfectly unaware that mine had been quietly rewritten by the people who were supposed to protect me. I sat back down and opened my laptop. The banking portal blinked to life, a sterile landscape of balances and transactions. Each green checkmark beside autopay active looked like a scar. I scrolled through every active connection, studying the system I'd built, one that had kept them comfortable and me invisible. "This isn't a web," I whispered. "It's a cage." I hovered the cursor over the pause autopay option but didn't click. Not yet. The button glowed faintly, patient, like it knew I would return. I took a screenshot instead and saved it to the frozen accounts folder. Beneath it I typed a note, "Every system has a switch. Every giver eventually stops giving." The act of saving that file steadied me. For once I wasn't reacting, I was recording. I wasn't losing control. I was documenting it. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Cold, I realized, was not cruel. It was clarity. It was the space between manipulation and truth. My mother called me cold whenever I refused to play along, whenever I didn't respond to emotional bait. Maybe she'd been right. Maybe coldness was my way of surviving them. The radiator clicked on, filling the apartment with dry warmth. I turned it down. I preferred the air sharp, honest. At noon, I opened the kitchen cabinet and pulled out a small binder of old receipts, gifts, groceries, family events. I flipped through until I found one that stopped me, candlelight decor, $1.182. The receipt was dated from the year Melissa hosted Christmas for the first time. I could still remember the way she had said, "It's my turn to host. You'll just help with the boring stuff, right?" I had smiled, written the check, and stayed up until 3 a.m. wrapping centerpieces in red ribbon. The photo she posted the next day credited Mom's creative touch. I slid the receipt into a plastic sleeve and whispered never again. The longer I sat there, the more I understood how deliberate it all had been. They hadn't stumbled into using me, they'd perfected it. The manipulation was always wrapped in sugar. You're so organized. You make everything easier. We don't know what we'd do without you. Now I did. They'd survive, just colder. By mid-afternoon, the snow outside had thickened, coating the streets in quiet white. I poured myself another glass of water and stared at the patterns forming on the window. Each flake landed softly and melted into something new. I pulled my chair closer to the desk and opened my laptop again. My fingers moved almost on their own, opening folders, renaming files. Mortgage frozen, utilities frozen, insurance frozen. The repetition felt cleansing. When I finished, I created one more folder on the desktop and titled it Truth. Inside, I copied everything: documents, screenshots, receipts. Then I wrote in a small notebook beside it, Truth lives here now, not in memory, not in apology. I sat quietly for a long time, listening to the wind push against the glass. My phone vibrated once, a text from Melissa. For a second, my heart jumped. But when I opened it, it was just a group message she had accidentally sent, full of emojis and Christmas updates. Can't wait for tomorrow. Villa looks perfect. I read it twice. The word perfect made me laugh out loud. It was hollow plastic, the way everything about them had always been. I took a screenshot and saved it too. Proof of the illusion. Then, slowly, deliberately, I opened a new note on my laptop and typed, They built their house on my numbers, my signatures, my silence. But even silence leaves a trail. I saved it under the same folder, Truth. Outside, the daylight began to fade. The snow turned to a soft drizzle, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like bruised gold. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat by the window, watching the street lamps flicker on. The apartment was quiet, but not empty. The quiet felt earned now. For years, warmth had meant exhaustion, keeping everyone comfortable, smoothing over the cracks they made. Now the cold felt clean, merciful. I whispered, They called me cold. Maybe they were right. The words didn't sting anymore. They sounded like truth. I stood, stretched my stiff limbs, and placed every folder, paper and digital, into a neat stack. I took one last look at the top page, the one labeled Mortgage, Evergreen Lending. Then I slipped it into an envelope and sealed it shut. My fingers lingered on the edge for a moment before I wrote a single word across the front in black ink, closed. When I slid the envelope into my desk drawer, something inside me settled. It wasn't joy, not even relief. It was balance. The heater clicked again, low and steady. The light from the window dimmed to blue-gray, the color of acceptance. I sat back in the chair, hands folded in my lap, and whispered to the empty room. For years I paid to keep them warm. Now I finally understand the value of cold. And this time the silence that followed didn't ache. It felt like peace. I found the old hard drive in the bottom drawer of my desk, buried under years of tax folders and warranty papers. The silver casing was scratched, but when I plugged it into my laptop, the faint light blinked alive like it had been waiting. The folder popped up on the screen, Family Memories. For a second, I almost closed it. I knew what kind of ghosts lived in there. But curiosity, or maybe defiance, kept my hands steady. I double-clicked. Rows of subfolders appeared, organized by year: Christmas, 2017 wedding, 2018 birthday, 2019 villa, renovation, 2020. Each one was a monument to effort I had quietly carried. I opened one at random. Inside were photos of parties, smiling faces, glittering decorations. I recognized every item in the frames because I'd paid for them. The gold ornaments on the mantel, the ribboned centerpieces, the lights that twined around the banister. Every detail had passed through my hands and my accounts. Not a single picture had me in it. My throat tightened. I clicked through one folder after another, hoping maybe I'd see my reflection in a mirror, a shadow in the background, anything to prove I existed in those moments. but all I found were angles that seemed designed to exclude me. I whispered to myself, I kept the proof of my own invisibility. A spreadsheet caught my eye in the bottom corner. Budget 2018. XLXX. I opened it. The columns were painfully neat, color-coded expenses, payment dates, vendors. My notes were still there. Cake deposit paid, lighting paid, cleaning crew paid, each entry tagged with my initials VH. I stared at those 2 letters until they blurred. I dragged the file into a new folder inside frozen accounts. Then another Melissa's engagement, expenses, Timber XLSX. One by one, I copied them all. Evidence of a life lived for everyone but myself. The next folder I opened was labeled Christmas 2015. I remembered that one before the images even loaded. The year I covered the villa's overdue mortgage payment in secret, so my mother could host the holiday stress-free. She had cried on the phone that week, her voice shaking as she said, "You're my rock, Vanessa. I'll pay you back as soon as the new year starts." She never did. The photos from that year were bright, perfect, staged. I zoomed in on one Melissa holding a glass of champagne, my mother's arm draped proudly around her shoulders. The caption read, "We made it through another year together." I remembered standing behind the camera watching them clink glasses. I had been smiling then too, though my smile never made it into the frame. 8 years ago, I'd believed that money could buy belonging. Back then, I was 27, working as a junior accountant, still believing my family was my safety net. The first time Mom asked for help, she sounded embarrassed. "Just this once, sweetheart," she'd said. "The bank's being difficult, and I know you're responsible." I'd wired the payment the same afternoon. That night, I stayed late at work to make up for what I'd lost. When I got home, she texted a single heart emoji. That was her thank you. At Christmas dinner that year, I'd noticed how easily Melissa accepted gifts labeled from Mom and me. The scarf I'd chosen, the necklace I'd bought, credited to my mother's generosity. I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was that everyone was happy, that the family stayed intact. Looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the conditioning. Help became habit. Habit became obligation. I scrolled to another folder, birthday, 2019, the one I hosted for myself. I remembered the effort, the home-cooked meal, the invitations sent to the family group chat, the neat rows of candles on the cake. My mother had called that afternoon. "I'm so sorry, honey, Melissa's moving into her new condo. She needs me." Rain check, no one else came. Later, I saw the photos online, my mother and Melissa smiling in front of the condo, champagne glasses raised. The decorations looked familiar, streamers I had bought for a surprise party weeks earlier. My own cake sat untouched in my fridge for 3 days. Now, years later, I scrolled through those same images and saw what I'd missed, then the gift bag I'd mailed, sitting unopened on the counter in the corner of their photo. My handwriting still visible on the tag. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, breathing slowly, realizing how systematic it had all been. I had been the bank account, the planner, the fixer, and they had learned that I'd never say no. A flicker of anger rose sharp and fast, but it didn't last. What replaced it was colder, cleaner, a kind of clarity. They hadn't just used me. They had built their family identity on the foundation of my silence. I opened my banking archives and started exporting records from those years. Each PDF carried my name, each one a timestamp of quiet sacrifice. Mortgage payments, utilities, credit card transfers, all filed neatly under my initials. When I finished, I named the new folder Debt, History, 2017-2022. I sat back, the sound of the heater faint in the background. My reflection in the laptop screen looked calm, almost unrecognizable. I whispered, "They've lived on my December." I opened my notebook and began writing what I now understood to be the pattern. They ask, I fix, they forget. I forgive, 4 steps. A loop, a system. The kind of system that runs until someone cuts the power. I flipped to a new page and drew a red line straight through the middle. The break felt symbolic, a fault line splitting through the past. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. I leaned back, my eyes burning from the glow of the screen. Every year I'd thought I was keeping the peace. Now I realized I'd just been keeping them comfortable. I turned the laptop toward me again and created a new subfolder inside frozen accounts. I labeled it Motive. Into it, I dragged the photos, receipts, spreadsheets, and screenshots. I wasn't sure if I was building a case or writing an obituary for a family that had never really existed. The folder grew quickly, small icons stacking like tombstones. Each file represented a moment I'd mistaken for love. When the last file finished copying, I closed the lid of the laptop. The screen went black, leaving only my reflection. I thought about the years I'd lost chasing their approval, the nights I'd stayed up late, balancing their budgets while ignoring my own, the calls that began with "sweetheart" and ended with, "Could you just help one more time? Not anymore." The sound of my phone vibrating broke the silence. I looked down. A message from Lila, my cousin. She'd always been quiet, distant from family drama. "Hey Vanessa. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I recorded something last week. You might need to hear it." My pulse quickened. I typed back, "What is it?" A few seconds later, the 3 dots appeared. Then a new message. "They were talking about you. I couldn't stand it. I'll send it now." I stared at the screen, watching as the file began to download. The name appeared: Dinner, recording MP3. My hands went still on the table. The bar crept slowly across the screen. 60%. 80. 95. Outside, snow began to fall again, thick and quiet, layering the city in white. When the file reached 100, I whispered, "Sometimes the past doesn't just echo. It sends proof." And for the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. The file finished downloading just after midnight. For a moment, I didn't move. The title sat there on the screen, glowing softly against the dark: Dinner, recording, MP3. I stared at it, unsure whether I was ready to press play. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. Then I clicked. The sound started with clinking glasses, the low hum of voices, laughter. I could tell it was recorded in my mother's dining room. Even through the muffled audio, I could recognize the sharp tap of her heels on the hardwood floor. Then Melissa's voice came through clearer. "She's so calculated. It's creepy, honestly. She does nice things, but acts like we should throw her a parade for it." Someone laughed. "Maybe Kay, one of our cousins." My mother's voice followed, colder. "Vanessa was never really part of us. She's just convenient. You know, she pays for things, she organizes everything, but it's transactional. She doesn't have warmth." There was a pause, then a man's voice. "Brian, my mother's boyfriend, the one who worked at the bank." "Don't stir the pot," he said calmly. "Keep her name on the papers. It's clean. No need to rock the boat." A burst of laughter erupted after that. Glasses clinking. Forks scraping. The sound of them carrying on like they hadn't just torn me apart word by word. The recording ended there. I sat completely still. My chest rose and fell, but everything else felt frozen. My hands were trembling, not from shock, but from the confirmation that everything I'd suspected was true. Convenient. That word echoed in my mind until it lost shape. Convenient. Not daughter, not sister. Convenient. I pressed play again, forcing myself to listen one more time, this time, with no illusions left. The tone of their laughter was worse than the words themselves. It wasn't casual. It was familiar, practiced, as if this conversation had happened before. When the recording ended the second time, I saved it to the frozen accounts folder, under a new subfolder, Audio Proof. I named the file Convenient, MP3. I stared at the name for a long time before closing the laptop. My reflection on the screen looked different, tired, yes, but also strangely clear-eyed. I whispered, "They built comfort on my silence." I stood and paced the apartment, the creak of the floorboards grounding me. My breath came slow, and even now. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from certainty. For years I'd wondered if I was imagining things, if maybe I was too sensitive, too cold, too distant. They'd told me that often enough that I'd started to believe it. But hearing it, their voices in real time stripped every doubt away. It was like the truth had finally caught up to the lies. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking slightly. I set it on the table beside my laptop and pressed my palms flat on the surface to steady myself. The cold from the glass seeped into my skin. There was something grounding about it. Cold was simple. Cold told the truth. I opened my notebook and wrote at the top of a blank page. They said I'm convenient. They're right. Convenience ends when the service stops. My handwriting was sharp, deliberate. Then, beneath that line, I made a list of every active account I managed: mortgage, utilities, property tax, internet, gas, electric, insurance, catering, villa, rent. I wrote each one out carefully, noting the account numbers and draft dates. Next to each, I drew a small empty box. I leaned back in my chair, tapping the pen against the paper. Those boxes were waiting for something. At the top of the page, I wrote one word in block letters: freeze. The decision didn't come from rage. It came from logic. I wasn't erasing anyone. I was ending an agreement that only one side had honored. My phone buzzed. A message from Lila. "Did you hear it? I'm so sorry. I just couldn't let them talk like that without you knowing." I typed back, "Thank you, Lila. I'll keep it safe." She replied, "Be careful. If they find out, they'll twist it." I stared at that message for a moment, then closed the chat. There was nothing left to twist. The damage was already documented, signed, sealed, and timestamped. I reopened the laptop and dragged the audio file into the evidence folder. Then I copied every spreadsheet, every receipt, every screenshot into one consolidated folder. Each click felt surgical, precise. It wasn't revenge yet, it was preparation. The snow outside had stopped. The street below was quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm when the world holds its breath. I sat by the window and watched my breath fog the glass. For years I had thought silence meant defeat. Now it meant control. I thought about Christmas Eve, just a few days away. I could picture them in the villa, warm lights, expensive food, Melissa giving her rehearsed toast, my mother nodding with that small, satisfied smile. The sound of their laughter echoing against the walls I had paid to heat. Then I thought of the words in that recording. "Keep her name on the papers. It's clean." I laughed softly, a hollow sound that filled the room. They wanted clean, I'd give them clean. So clean they'd choke on the cold air. I walked back to the table and flipped open my notebook again. I wrote out the steps. 1. Freeze mortgage. $2, $800 monthly. 2. Cancel autopay utilities, electric, gas, water, internet. 3. Revoke catering payment. $7, $500. 4. Stop decoration vendor. $1, $200. 5. Terminate villa lease. $2, $800, due deck 27. Each task had a blank space next to it for confirmation. I tore out the page and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. My to-do list for freedom. I sat back down and turned on the lamp. The light pooled across the papers, sharp and steady. My shadow fell cleanly across the surface of the desk, and for the first time it didn't look like someone diminished. It looked like someone poised. My mother had once told me, "You always think too much before you act." I used to take it as criticism. Tonight it felt like prophecy. I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Action Log. Inside, I created a text file for notes. At the top, I wrote every transaction undone, every tie reversed, every chain recorded. The heater kicked on again, humming low. The air in the room warmed, but I didn't feel it. I was already somewhere colder, clearer. I picked up my pen and checked the first box next to mortgage freeze. I opened the bank's website and logged in. The numbers were familiar, too familiar. Payment schedule recurring. Beneficiary Diana Holt. I scrolled to the bottom and found the option I'd been hovering over in my mind for days. Suspend autopay. My finger rested on the mouse. I whispered, "Not yet." It wasn't hesitation, it was ceremony. I wanted to remember the moment before the click, the breath before the storm. I minimized the window and looked out the window one more time. Snow had started to fall again, thin and deliberate. I pressed my fingertips to the glass, feeling the faint vibration of the wind outside. The city was still awake somewhere out there, but my world had narrowed to this small apartment, this small desk, this small decision that would echo far beyond its size. I whispered to the quiet. They thought erasing me meant I'd disappear. But I'm the foundation they're standing on. When I step away, they'll feel the ground crack. The wind howled faintly, almost like it was agreeing. I returned to the desk, opened the banking tab, and clicked Confirm Freeze. A small green checkmark appeared. It was done. The room didn't erupt. Nothing dramatic happened. Just a subtle shift in the air, a pulse of clarity. I checked the first box on my list. Then I picked up the pen again. The next line read Utilities, Cancel Autopay. One by one, the lights of their comfort began to flicker out in my mind. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't angry. I was calm. Outside, the snow fell heavier. The city lights blurred behind the frost, and inside the woman they called convenient started to become something else entirely untouchable. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I finally stopped pacing. The apartment had gone completely still, the hum of the heater fading into silence. Outside, snow fell in slow, lazy spirals under the streetlight, each flake drifting down like it had nowhere urgent to be. The world felt suspended, and so did I. My laptop screen glowed across the room, waiting for me. I walked back to the table, the wooden floor creaking under my bare feet. My notebook lay open beside the keyboard, the words from earlier staring up at me in red ink. Freeze everything. I traced the lines with my fingertip, as if touching the plan would make it more real. The cursor blinked on the bank portal. The option was still there, suspend autopay. I took a long breath, the kind you take before diving underwater, and clicked. A pop-up appeared instantly. Are you sure you want to freeze this account? I clicked yes. A small green checkmark appeared with a single line of text, request submitted successfully. For a moment I didn't move. I stared at that sentence until my reflection blurred into the glass of the screen. The only sound in the room was my heartbeat, steady, deliberate. It was done. 4 years of quiet payments. 48 transactions, each one made out of obligation dressed as love. Ended by one confirmation button. I opened the frozen accounts folder and took a screenshot of the confirmation page. Then I dragged it into the subfolder marked Proof. The act of saving it felt ceremonial. The heater kicked back on a low, familiar hum. The irony made me smile. Somewhere, my mother's house would start cooling within days, the warmth fading inch by inch as the systems I'd been carrying began to shut down. I whispered to the empty room, "Merry Christmas, Mom." Next was the utilities. I logged into the power company's website, my password auto-filled. The dashboard displayed the villa's address, my name bold at the top. Primary account holder Vanessa Holt. I clicked Manage Account. The menu opened with options: change address, add payment method, suspend service. My hand didn't tremble this time. I selected suspend service. A warning appeared in bright yellow: power suspension may affect heating and water systems. I smiled faintly. I know. When the confirmation email arrived seconds later, I saved it to the folder labeled Utilities. The clock on my stove read 2:47 a.m. One by one, I moved through each account: gas, water, internet. Each system that had kept their house glowing and comfortable, powered by the same silence they'd used to erase me. I paused before opening the catering invoice. Candle Light Events, $7.500 pending payment. The receipt included a note from Melissa: please use Vanessa's account. She offered to help. Offered. I opened the email chain that followed. Melissa had copied my address on every message, but I hadn't responded to any of them. That was her trick: silence as consent. I clicked Request Reversal. The form asked for a reason. I typed unauthorized charge made without account holder's approval. My fingers hovered over send. I whispered, "You took my name out of the invitation list, but kept it on the invoice." Then I clicked. The catering company would wake to that email in a few hours, confused, maybe panicked, but the process would be automatic. A stop payment notice would freeze the funds until they reviewed the claim. I leaned back and exhaled. My chest ached from holding my breath, but it wasn't fear, it was release. I moved on to the villa rental. The lease had been processed under my name as usual. $2,800 a month automatically drafted. I found the contact number for the property manager and dialed. A groggy voice answered. "Silver Pines Management, this is Daniel." "Hi," I said evenly. "This is Vanessa Holt. I need to cancel future rentals for the property at 48 North Bay Road, effective immediately." He hesitated. "Oh, of course, Miss Holt. Just to confirm, this is for the Holt family's Christmas villa, yes. There will be no future payments from my account. Please send confirmation to this email." A pause, then understood. "I'll process it right away." "Thank you, Daniel," I said, my tone polite but final. When I hung up, the quiet in the room thickened again. I took a sip of cold coffee from the mug beside me and set it down untouched. Then I opened my spreadsheet, the one I'd built when I started tracking every penny. The columns were neat, color-coded. Red for active, blue for closed, gray for pending. I added one more row at the bottom: villa lease, terminated 12/23, $2,800. Then next to it, in the status column, I wrote frozen. Each update felt cleaner than the last. Every transaction I stopped was like cutting another invisible rope. The glow of the laptop washed over my hands as I typed, the rhythmic sound of the keys steadying me. It was strange how quiet power felt. I opened a new folder titled Action Logs and dragged every confirmation inside: screenshots, receipts, notices. I backed it all up to an external drive, then another, 2 copies just in case. When I was finished, I placed the drives in a small fireproof box beneath my desk. On a slip of paper I wrote, "If anything happens, this is the truth." I folded it neatly and slid it inside before locking the box shut. For a long time I just sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the laptop screen. My fingers traced the rim of the mug, the ceramic cold against my skin. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exact. I looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. The city outside was asleep, unaware that somewhere one quiet woman had just rewritten the balance of an entire family. The heater rattled softly, the air inside too warm now. I turned the thermostat down until the faint hum disappeared. Then I opened my notebook and wrote one final note beneath my checklist: mortgage, frozen. Utilities, frozen. Catering, reversed. Decorations, canceled. Villa lease, terminated. At the bottom I drew a line and wrote total frozen $28,600. The number looked both enormous and small enormous. For the burden it represented, small for the cost of freedom. I stood and stretched, walking to the window. Outside, the snow shimmered under the lamplight, the world muffled in pale silence. Somewhere the city's early risers would soon wake, start their cars, shovel driveways. But for now, everything was perfectly still. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered, "They thought silence made me weak. They never realized it made me dangerous." The reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Eyes, sharp posture, straight, no trace of the woman who used to wait for invitations that never came. I turned away and shut off the lamp. The apartment fell into shadow, but the glow of the laptop lingered like a heartbeat on the desk. Before going to bed, I opened one last tab on the browser, my email drafts. 3 messages sat there ready but unsent, one addressed to a local reporter, one to the nonprofit director where my mother volunteered, one to Brian's branch supervisor at the bank. Each message contained attachments labeled proof. No accusations, no insults, just facts. I reread the first line of each draft. "Please find attached documentation regarding financial discrepancies tied to the Holt household." All materials are verified and traceable. I hovered over the send button, then closed the tab. Not yet. Timing mattered. Tomorrow would be Christmas Eve. I shut the laptop and let the silence reclaim the room. The refrigerator hummed faintly, the only sound left. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink and washed the mug. When I turned off the kitchen light, the room dimmed into blue-gray, the color of pre-dawn. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet. It didn't ache anymore. It hummed, steady, low, alive. Then I whispered to the dark, let them wake to the cold. And when I finally went to bed, the last thing I saw was the small green checkmark still glowing faintly on my laptop screen, a quiet symbol of everything I had taken back. The snow outside was almost blinding when I woke. Thin morning light streamed through the blinds, scattering across the room like shards of glass. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, vibrating softly against the wood. I ignored it at first, rolling onto my side and pulling the blanket higher. But it wouldn't stop. I reached for it, eyes still half closed. 42 notifications blinked on the screen. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. The first preview froze me, powers out. What did you do? I sat up, slowly, heart pounding. The next few messages stacked one after another. Everything's gone dark. Mom's screaming. Catering can't process payment. Call me now. The air in my apartment felt strangely calm, heavy with quiet. Outside, the world shimmered white. Inside, the chaos was all digital, vibrating in my palm. I set the phone down on the table and took a deep breath. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. The day they'd chosen to celebrate without me. The irony was exquisite. I stood and walked to the window. Down below my street looked peaceful, cars covered in snow, neighbors carrying grocery bags and wrapped boxes. Somewhere in Seattle, the villa would be full of noise until the lights went out. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, Mom. I let it ring until it stopped. Then another text flashed from Melissa. You've gone too far. People are freezing. My chest rose and fell slowly. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands steady. Steam curled upward, the scent rich and earthy. I stirred in a spoonful of sugar, the sound sharp against the porcelain. Across the room, the phone lit again, glowing in pulses. Guests are leaving. The heater won't turn on. Why won't the card work? I took my coffee to the window and watched the snow. Every sip felt deliberate, every moment stretched thin, with a kind of satisfaction I didn't have to hide anymore. They had wanted a Christmas without me. They'd gotten it. I opened my laptop. The frozen accounts folder sat neatly on the desktop. When I clicked it open, rows of files greeted me, screenshots, receipts, confirmations, each one a quiet witness. I opened the Utilities tab. The confirmation email from 2 nights ago still sat there. Service suspension effective December 24 at 6:00 a.m. Right on schedule. I checked the time. 6:37. The phone buzzed again, harder this time.